Okay, so I'm so happy we're here today with you. We've got many of our hosting team members here today. Stefan and Georgia and Magali and a few folks from other folks from La 27e Région are here to host our conversation today with our very special guests from Nantes. And this is our hosting team for this larger project. Some of us are here, some of us are sleeping. We're really pleased that they're here with us to start this 3-session discussion and focus on theories of change. So we've had so far, just to orient us in our journey in this community of practice, we've had 2 setting the foundation sessions. You can find the recordings for those through our website. We're here the first of 3 in theories of change. And then after this, starting in February, we'll have another cycle focused on connecting the inner and outer work of transformation. So that's still to come, along with more sessions as we go. So this is where we are, just to orient you. We're still at the beginning. We're happy you're here. We're happy that you're joining us and really look forward to the discussion. This is a community of practice. This isn't we are experts presenting information to you. We are in community with one another, exploring challenging topics about the transformation of public sector and our innovation work. And so we're going to be hearing a provocation and an invitation and some thinking from La 27e Région and from Nantes, and then we're going to be in discussion with each other about what we're thinking about and learning in response to that. So warm up here. This isn't passive listening space. And also we know that we're all at different stages in our understanding of theory of change and integration of our work. So engage with this as makes most sense to you. We are diving right in, assuming that there's some base knowledge of theories of change in this context, but we will warm us up. So we'll all get our minds and our hearts into the conversation. Here are a few links for you, and we'll show these again at the end. Maybe Pavand or Stefan, you could share the editable slide link just so people can start to get in there and interact with these things as they wish for this slideshow. So we're sharing blogs in our Medium space, and we invite other authors there. It doesn't have to be just us as the co-hosts. The website will help you find your way into everything else that you might need. There's our email contact. The registration for that session is here. And then also the registration for the community of practice and the consent form to participate in this as research is there as that last link. The register to join the COP is there. And that's also where you can get added to our email list for hearing about the session, any upcoming sessions or anything else that's happening. Okay, so our plan for today, we're going to do a little theory of change warm-up. There'll be a case presentation from La 27e Région and from Magali and Virginie from Nantes, and then there'll be a discussion on these 2 prompts. So you can kind of hold these in your mind now as you're listening. From theory to reality, what are the challenges when implementing a theory of change? What does the evolution of markers, which is language that you're going to learn more about from the team from Nantes, the theory of change look like? And then how might we make this more ambitious and radical, our public sector innovation work, using theories of change as a framework. So that's what we'll be focusing our discussion on today. Little theory of change warm up. I was talking with Stefan about this and Georgia about this the other day, and there's a video that talks about theories of change from the particular point of view of systems change, and it kind of does everything. So I was like, I don't need to make this again. I'm going to play the video because they've nailed it. So this is a short 5-minute video about theories of change in the context of systems change. There are different contexts that you might have worked with theories of change, but this is one that I find super useful. So I'm going to play this, and then we'll have a quick chance to chat about theories of change with each other. Stefan, I can see you, so when I'm playing this, can you give me a thumbs up if you can both see it and hear it? There isn't any sound yet. There's not supposed to be.
Systems change is about changing complex organizations. It is thus, before anything, what we would call a theory of change. It will give us a set of ideas and methods about how to change in complex environments. People have been thinking about how to do change within organizations long before we came up with the idea of systems change. So a good place to start is by first understanding a little about theories of change in general, so that we can better position systems change in its broader family and see how and why it is unique. The Center for Theory of Change tells us that a theory of change is essentially a comprehensive description and illustration of how and why the desired change is expected to happen in a particular context. Quite simply, theories of change are the essential plan as to how we are going to get from where we are to where we want to be. NPC, in their paper entitled Creating Your Theory of Change, break this down a bit farther, noting, a theory of change is a scheme to help us describe the need you are trying to address, the changes you want to make, your outcomes, and what you plan to do, your activities. A theory of change is always present within a planned course of action, whether it is explicitly acknowledged or not. What we wish to do here is make as much explicit as possible, so that we can be clear about it and know the assumptions involved. This gives us the capacity to question whether those are valid assumptions and whether the whole thing makes sense or where the issues might lie. Often, organizations wish to see a change. They will have an idea about what they would like to see as the outcome. Their view of the world is based upon some assumptions, and they take some actions, but there is little coherent connection between them because they are not really aware of them as a whole. As such, a theory of change is a powerful tool that helps organizations articulate the connection between their actions and their mission. It aims to give an outline of both the assumptions involved in supporting the change process and the actions that will lead to the desired outcome. The theory of change defines long-term goals and then maps backward to identify necessary preconditions. Through theories of change, actions and the achievement of the long-term goals can be better understood, connected, and articulated. A theory of change is often illustrated by a diagram or chart, yet it should be more than this. It should help us to consider and communicate the assumptions and enablers that surround our initiatives and explain why we think our activities will lead to desirable outcomes. Theory of change, developed from the field of program evaluation in the 1990s as a new way of analyzing the theories motivating programs and initiatives working for social change. Since then, the use of the theory of change in planning and evaluation has increased hugely among NGOs, philanthropies, government agencies, etc. Change processes are now no longer seen as linear, but as having many feedback loops that need to be understood, with links to complexity and systems thinking now forming. Theories of change can be simple and linear in their assumptions, taking the form of logic models and log frames or even gantry charts, involving linear or if-then relationships. However, systems change is based upon the assumption that the system we are dealing with is not amenable to this kind of linear process of change, but is a search for a different form of change that would be relevant for more complex nonlinear change processes. With nonlinear processes of change, one thing does not lead sequentially to another, but instead, outcomes emerge out of the underlying structure of the system, the way the parts are interrelated. Theories of change make the connection between what we are doing and the changes we want to see. This remains the same even when dealing with complex systems. So a theory of change still applies. We are still acting strategically to change a system, and we need to be aware of the assumptions we are making, where we want to go, and our general approach. The intervention, however, is now no longer a linear process. It is one that instead is based around nonlinear process of emergence. Although change in a complex organization is nonlinear, we still need some theoretical grounding to structure our thinking as to how change happens, and this is what we will look at in the coming 3 modules, as we look at the adaptive cycle, the 2-loop model, and transition theories.
Okay. Thank you to the people that made these videos. There's a whole excellent series. So we're going to just quickly pair you up in some breakout rooms for you to chat with each other about this in your context. In preparing for this session, we've had really interesting, and over the years, we've had really interesting conversations about theory of change. In some where I am, it's a really rich practice and a common practice in certain sectors, but it's not actually very common in the public sector and especially in local government where I've worked. So some people, this might be something that's entirely new to you and not used in your context. For others, it might be foundational to your practice and something in between. regardless, often there's an implicit theory of change at work in what it is that you're doing, even if you don't call it that. And so we'd love to just pair you up, get a chance to meet somebody from a different context and have a quick chat about, do you have a theory of change for your work? If yes, what are some of the main elements and what elements might be missing? If not, why not? And why do you think having a theory of change might support your strategy and your action? So Peivan's going to send us off just for 5 or 6 minutes to have a quick chat with somebody, and then we'll come back. Welcome back, everybody. Oh, hi, Mikhail. Nice to see you. Stefan, are you here? Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll let you decide if you want to hear from what happened in the breakout rooms or not, and I'm going to share my screen for you.
Yeah, please.
Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you so much, Lindsay. That was a great time for this conversation. My name is Stéphane Vincent. I run a non-profit called La 27e Région in France. And I'm with Giorgia from Politecnico di Milano in Italy. In Torino, sorry, not Milano. They are competitors, sorry. Maybe first point, we are non-native English speaker. So I ask for patience and maybe don't hesitate for the native ones. Don't hesitate to articulate, to speak slowly, because we are in an international conversation, and it may help that we are aware of that. So we have the opportunity to organize 3 sessions on theory of change. So we will tell you a little bit what are the different sessions that we will organize. Maybe you can show the next slide, Lindsay. Thank you. So we have drawn this tree to explain what kind of session we will have in today and on the next 2 ones. Do you want to?
Yeah, with pleasure. Actually, we wanted to explain with a metaphorical representation that you can see the complex subject, which is change and theory of change. So our idea is that change is made of different streams, different paths that we can develop, of course, better if together with collaborations. And we can see that theory of change enacts as a base, a theoretical base for this change. We are always more engaged with wicked problems, so problems which are more complex, and also with unexpected events. So you can see that we try to tackle them and to overcome them, maybe not finding a solution, but adapting to it and mitigating it. And our idea was also to stress the concept of dominant systems, which is like a rock, a sort of structure which is quite rigid, and we have to question and try to break in a metaphorical way to enable change, as well as questioning values and beliefs which are at the very baseline of these dominant systems. We will, as Stefan will show you, we will treat different streams and let's say elements that nourish, can feed change in our idea, which are experimentation, so an attitude to test by mistake and success, training, so also sharing new ideas, concepts and understandings, and also participation as key elements of this complex and articulated path.
So maybe, Lindsay, you can go to the next slide. So today we will start from the roots, from the bottom. We are inside the change. and we will have we are with the opportunity to listen to Magali and Virginie from the city of Nantes, who have launched a few years ago a concept that they call markers. But markers is very similar, as you will see, with the theory of change. So we will start from this case study and start the conversation from there, which means that we will, it's also an opportunity to get all your own experience, but we will start with this case. The next session on December 7th of December will be in another space of the tree. It will be more somewhere between the dominant system and values. How do you change the dominance, the vision of the dominant and the dominated? And we will hear from a case from French overseas territories, which is Réunion Island. And I think Isabelle is somewhere here in the audience, and she will made a presentation of a training program that she has designed. And this program is about reconciliation for people and the communities living in Réunion Island. And it's a training session that has been designed for and with civil servants. So we found interesting to see how do you tackle cultural matters there. And then there will be a third session in January. We will give you the precise date later. This one will be more from the weak problem side, and it will be more inspired by political science. The question we ask there is, we know that we need to tackle more wicked problems, very complex problems like ecological transition and social justice. But the problem we have is the democratic debate is very low and very polarized, and there is a trend to depolitization. So we choose policies for technical reason, for instance. So how do you deal with the need for more political debate to open up emergent visions, to open up new possibilities? And we think that would be interesting. And we will have cases from a researcher based in Lyon. So again, a French case. It's a very Frenchy session, a series of sessions. And we will have a Cécile Robert, which is a researcher in Sciences Po Lyon, and she will come with practical cases. So this is our proposition, 3 sessions around the theory of change, system change, how we can go further. So maybe we can start immediately with the first case. So I'm not from Nantes, so I speak under the authority of Virginie and Magali, but I will make my best to make a summary of what are these markers. So we are in the city of Nantes, which is a very dynamic city here in France, in the west of France, near the coast, one of the most dynamic cities here in France. And if you go to next slide, as many, can you go to next slide and say? No? I need you, Lindsay. Yeah, good. Thank you. The population is nearly 700,000, so it's quite a big size, a nice size as a city. There are many civil servants, something like 10,000 civil servants, many managers, 105,000. There are nearly 500 locations everywhere in the city, 3 different administrations, of course, the city hall, but also the metropolitan area, and there are dedicated social services, many different jobs, something like 150. So how do you deal with when you run such an organization, such a complex organization, and you, as a mayor, you want to get all these people towards ecological transition and social justice? So this is what is marker about. So maybe you can go to next slide. So marker is if you go look at the right of the screen, there are 6 different markers. 2 are named pillars marker because they are the most important one. One is ecological transition, and the other is about equality and social justice. And then you got 4 other markers who are more acting, making markers. It's about civic dialogue. How do you build with people, with citizens? The other is about proximity. The other one is alliance of territories. How do you build coalitions with the suburbs, with the countryside, outside the cities? And the 6th one is about experimentation and innovation. And I think Magali is in charge specifically of this marker. And on the left, you see how these markers have been built. So it's a process we started 2 or 3 years ago, and it was built from the vision of elected officials of the city, but there were also surveys and conversation with the civil servant themselves, with the citizen. And there was also a COVID survey. During the COVID, Nantes has launched a big survey. It was one of the cities in France who has launched a big survey. And from this, they get these 6 markers. So the definition of markers, they define the singularity of the project supported by all the thematic policies. They are the keywords that define the theory that define the project of the city. Next slide. And these 6 markers, they nourish the public policies. There are around 26 different public policies between the metropolitan area and the city hall, and they also feed the administration strategy. There is a kind of administration plan at the city of Nantes based on exemplarity, promoting public service know-how and organizational improvement. But this administration strategy must be inspired by these 6 markers. Next slide. So this is what markers are composed with. When you read the markers, it's a series of pages, depending on the markers, but it's 3, 4, or 6 pages, and you will find the why. For example, on ecological transition, you will find what are the challenge, the visions, the values, but also the diagnosis, the SWOT analysis. There is even the post-COVID consequences because they have updated these markers after the COVID. Then you will find the how, including the priorities, who are the specific beneficiaries of this marker, but also the contribution to the other markers. So there is a conversation between all the markers, the different scales between the center of the city, the metropolitan area, and so on, and the main projects and activities implemented. And then you will find content about the who and the what. So it includes the resource who are required by the marker, the financing stuff, the partnership, but also a description of the governance, the expertise needed, the criteria of success, the narrative, and how they organize feedback loop. So it's a document. Markers is specifically and mainly a document. But it's not only a document; it's also a management. In 2022, the top management has launched what they call M6, which is a series of meetings and a facilitation process where people in charge of markers, because there are people in charge of markers and teams in charge of markers, exchange their theories, where there are feedbacks, where there is co-design. Most markers all the markers are co-designed. It's not written by only one people, of course. It's every time a co-design process. Then there is an evaluation issue, even if I think, and Magali will tell us that it's not so easy to evaluate it. There is something to deal with the narrative, because each markers is also a narrative of a situation, a narrative of the challenge. So it's used also as a communication tool. There is a dissemination aspect also, how to share it with all the civil servants. And I don't know if it's really shared with the population, and maybe we can ask to Magali. She says no. So it's only an internal issue, but how do you share it with 10,000 civil servants, for instance? And there is also a training aspect, because you need to be trained to a marker to use it. And maybe we can ask to Magali what are the kind of practice and use from marker. So this is about what is about marker. And I think, Virginie, your idea was to give an example with the marker dedicated to ecological transition, right? Maybe we can show the next slide. Yeah. Virginie, you want to present it?
Yes, thank you. First, I apologize for my English. I'm not used to this kind of international conversations. So Stefan will help me if needed. We thought with Magali that it's interesting to show you one example of how we implement marker. So we will talk about the ecological transition marker, because I was in charge of that until last month. And now I will have to conduct the M6 in general. So maybe to begin, I think very important for us is the background history, because the most important thing is that just after the elections, our chief executive, general manager, announced huge reorganization to all the department directors, and explained that there will be a pilot of change. So it was really new for us, a pilot of change designed to go further, faster, and to mobilize civil servant, everyone. So it's very important, because it's legitimacy that was given to my department to go everywhere, in every administration, in every department. So it was very important for us. And another thing important is that Nantes was involved in ecological transition for many years. That is to say, it was seen like a new step, an important step, but a new step, a way to structure more action. But there were actions, and we were used to work with a lot of people. That is to say that we can begin this work with a lot of confidence between the departments. And so it's very important, I think. To finish with that, another thing important is we are not here to control, but to help departments. And I think it's essential. We have to help them to implement ecological transition in how they work and their public policies. That is to say that we had developed a supportive management approach while setting long-term goals. Right. It's important, I think, to explain what happened there. So framework documents to explain the marker, but after this document, there's a big action plan to implement the marker. So first of all, and that is the slide, what we are talking about. We had to elaborate a tool to talk to everyone, because ecological transition, what it deals with. So to explain what it means for Nantes. So for Nantes, it means that we had to integrate all these issues. We called it our Pentagon. Pentagon, yeah. We called it that. And so it was a very good tool to talk with everyone social departments, economic departments, everyone, so to explain what we wanted to do and what we are waiting about their change. And so we develop with them a support program. So with each department, we defined objectives for them, for their public policy, for their way of working, actions to reach these objectives, and also we define their needs of support. So we built this program with them. So it's a kind of contract between us, and there is now 370 actions that were defined like that. So it's a big program of change for this marker. So this is just one marker. And these actions have to be done during the, comment on dit mandat politique?
Mandate.
Okay,
Mandate.
during the mandate. So before 2026. Well, so it's a planified program. And we also mobilize all the administration process and strategies to introduce the perspective of ecological transition. That is to say, we had a method to analyze the budget from this perspective. It was easier because there was a national methodology that existed, so and tested. So we used that to give another point of view of budgets. For instance, it's not a tool for deciding; it's just a tool to show the impact. But it will be in sometimes. And so we also read all the deliberating acts from this perspective. We also, as we must also conduct ourselves in an exemplary manners, we have developed a program to change our ways of working. And finally, there are also huge development of awareness rising and information devoting times organized by different departments, which show that everyone feels concerned. And we are not, for the moment, with a real training program for all the administration, but we will work on it. Well.
Okay.
So it was too ample because I think it's the time is over. No.
Yeah. Yeah, but we will have occasion to come back to you. There are a few questions, and maybe Magali can include answers in our presentation. But someone asked, are these markers tied to political cycles? I think they are, but Magali will confirm. Have they been decided by the politician? I think I already said that the politicians were part of the design of the markers. They were not the only one, but they were part of it. And is it like the city strategy, or is there a separate city strategy? So maybe Magali, you can include answers in your presentation if you're okay.
Yes.
So Magali, we can hear your. We asked Magali to give a kind of SWOT analysis of the markers. If you want to tell a little bit.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, perfect. So yeah, maybe I'll start with answering the question. So yes, markers are tied to political cycles. We work with 6 years mandates in France at the city local government level. So they are really deeply linked to this political cycle. That doesn't mean that they're gonna be they might vanish after the mandates, but still we have to set the course of action we are able to do in this span of time. So that's the big picture here. And yes, they have been decided by the politicians, even though they are used mostly internally and not they are not they do not structure the way we do the storytelling of our everyday action. They're more designed to be a guide for action for internal actions, but they come from the politician. They are a direct traduction of the political platform. And also we have this usually when elections happens, then the mayor she wrote a letter to the chief of staff saying that that's what I want you to do for the next 6 years to implement my program, and was those in mind, and markers were already there, and that's the origin, one of the origin of the marker.
So she specifically named markers in the letter, for instance.
Virginie, maybe you remember, but I guess so. I guess so. So yeah, if we go back to, well, rather maybe not a SWOT, but rather like a positive and maybe negative or to be improved sides of those markers. But well, just to get back to this idea of theory of change, well, in my opinion, the main job of local governments is to actually improve people's lives or environment. So I guess that's basically a theory of change that's at the core of our action. And historically, it was mainly through public policies that we were trying to do that. It was, and it still is our main and most useful tool. But and you, as Stefan said it, in Nantes we have 26 different public policies ranging from education to waste management through urban planning or culture. So this is really a powerful tool. But the main problem of public policies, I guess, is that they are thematically defined, and when and they can have difficulties to grasp or deal with cross silos issues. And as you say, that the main challenges we are facing are cross silo issues. So that's also one of the main reasons why we came up with markers in Nantes. And that's not to say that the public policies are not coherent or useful tool anymore, but how to deal with these thematic tools and to have something else to deal with the cross silo approach. So basically, for me, one of the main strengths of the markers is that it's a powerful tool to organize the contribution of each public policies and also each department, as Virginie said it, to mostly the pillar markers, which are ecological transition and social justice and equality. It's for me one of the most efficient tools, also since direct and effective leverages of change at our hands still relies in public policies themselves. But then you have to organize how can each public policy contribute to this cross-systemic silo approach and change. So for me, that's the main argument for markers. It's also basically, as you showed it, it's not that appealing, not that sexy. It's a simple detailed plan with the same 12 questions you have to answer, but it's really useful to have a common framework designed for that. It's a good tool for public servants and elected officials dialogue, since when we agree upon what's inside a marker, we have to discuss it between elected official and civil servants. So it's really important. It makes it, this common framework design makes it easier for everybody to get on board, and also to use to make use of the other markers frames of reference. We are all supposed to be reading the different markers frames of reference, and so it's a good tool for that. Also, I think it was it's not that we didn't started thinking and acting about ecological change, ecological transition, or innovation dating back to 2020, but markers are really a good tool also to make issues and strategic priorities more explicit. they are written down and everybody has to know them and everybody can comment on them. So, and with that comes a broad internal diffusion strategy, so that to make sure that everybody, I mean, everybody, I'm not sure our 10,000 colleagues have all read the 10 pages of each markers, but still, it's really a tool that at last, where at last everyone can agree and know what we want to achieve, why and how on those issues. So it's really explicit and it's directly connected to our everyday work. It's not only the political platform, but also aimed from inside. And along the same line, it sets a common horizon destiny. It makes every contribution to this horizon visible. And also within the set of 12 questions, there is one where everybody had to name and put cite flagship actions that are contributing to the main objectives of the marker. So it makes the fact that every public policies and project have to ask themselves now, how can I or do I contribute to these greater objectives and my own public policies, and prove it through those flagship actions. So with those, we are all part of the same project. And it's also, lastly, it's also a good tool for internal, external symmetry, because we have there's as you said, the administration plan, and as to refer to those markers and the public policies also. So it helped creating conversion between the organization, how we work, the way we work, and our action for the territory. It's a matter of exemplarity. And now if I still got a few minutes just to guide you through some of the maybe weaknesses at that point or difficulties. Well, I think we are not that good right now on evaluation, also because we are maybe not mature yet, since most of the markers have been formalized maybe 1 or 2 years. They are 1 or 3 years old, depending on them. And also, there's the tricky causality question. How can we really isolate impacts due to the markers? What maybe things that are happening now that would have happened anyway, even though we hadn't those markers in place? So how can you really isolate that? Sorry. And but as Virginie mentioned it before, we also have implemented 2 monitoring tools: the green budget and also the gender sensitive budget. So those are quite the beginning of a long path, I guess, but they are good tools to help raise awareness and to take over the course of time better decision regarding those 2 pillar markers. Also, if you discuss with colleagues, all those 6 markers can make really prioritization harder or generate delays, because sometimes, well, it depends on the project, but not all the project can cross that many markers without generating delays or enhanced cost or complexity. And also sometimes some markers can contradict themselves. For example, if you have to organize and plan a new urban place and bear in mind the ecological transition issues, so thinking about shades, thinking about de-artificialize the soil so that the water can bring through and put in place. Sometimes it can contradict with the idea of gender sensitive public space, where you have to be or where the light you should always feel safe, so not hidden behind the trees, or so with always lights on. So sometimes on specific projects they contradict themselves. So how do you prioritize between those pillar markers? So people are telling some colleagues are saying that it can generate difficulties for teams on the ground and conflicts with or between elected officials that are supposed to hold those markers. And also if you have to be honest, the proliferation of strategic documents can also create an overwhelming feeling, because you've got one political platform, one administration plan, different strategic roadmaps, 6 markers, and 26 policies, public policies frames of reference. So one cannot keep all those in mind all the time. So there's a big challenge also for us in dealing with this complexity too. I guess
Thank you, Magali. There is a question from Fouad who asks, do these markers have set budget put in place as a foundation for the project working on top of them? What is the connection between the budgeting and markers, maybe?
Yes, well, maybe Virginie can be more precise on this, but it's definitely true for the pillar markers. They have their own budgets.
Just
not the
Magali, you want me to go on for the budget? The budget is for public policies. It's the structure in Nantes is that budget is are organized for each public policy. So it means that you don't have a special marker budget, but when we have when all departments talk about their budget and when they have to give priorities, clearly the markers are a criterion for to prioritize, to give priority. That's real. And in the last document written by our financial departments, it's written clearly that ecological transition and social justice are a real priority for budget. I don't know if it's clear enough.
Okay. Any other question before we shift for the to open up the conversation? Because we get this experience from Nantes, but there are many other experience. I don't think that Nantes, that Virginie and Magali think that they find the best solution to theorize change in an organization, but we thought it was interesting to start from this example. Is there any question, practical question about, and that would help you to understand very precisely how markers work, or maybe we can shift to the next session? Okay. Okay, Renaud, go with the kids, Renaud. No worry. They don't really care about theory of change, maybe. Okay, Lindsay, do you want to introduce the next stage?
Yes. Thank you, and thank you, Virginie and Magali. That was really interesting. I had a former colleague was chatting with me and asking just how is this different than like a comprehensive policy that we worked on together before. And I think that your orientation to that it's in like it's a comprehensive internal organizational change framework too, right? It's not just this outward orientation is really interesting, but it sets the framing for the outward policy work. So I think it's really I'm really struck by the ambition, right, of trying to shift, like that you've got staff and elected officials that are willing to take that on in that sort of way. There's so much, in my experience, so much innovation work is like patching things, right? Like we focus really specifically on a very specific interaction or program or policy or service, and work our magic in that specific space, but to like bring these innovation processes and practices into this organizational transformation work is really interesting. So thank you for sharing that example. So we have about 35, 40 minutes to be in conversation with one another before we close. And we have 2 questions to get us started. That said, feel free to make this space your own and take the conversation where it is that is most interesting and relevant for you. If you're comfortable, we'd love to see you here on camera with us. Again, we are recording, so if you don't want to do that, that's fine too. But we'd love to see you, so that we feel like we're in community with each other, if you're comfortable with that. So our first, I'll maybe leave the slides off. Pavan, maybe you could share the editable slide link again, so people have that handy. And because we do have a space to write in for the comments in the slides too, if you wish. But our first prompt for us is a question around from theory to reality. So what are the challenges when implementing a theory of change in your own experiences? When you have this, whether it's an implicit or an explicit theory of change in your public innovation work, what kinds of challenges come up for you as you're working toward moving that from theory and into reality? So Magali shared many of those in the form of strengths and weaknesses or threats. I don't know if Stéphane, you want to kick us off there by thinking about that in your context at La 27e Région. Like, how do you, as you work to more strongly theorize your own work in your own practice, what are some of the challenges that you're facing as you move into implementation? And then we'll open it up from there.
Yeah, I can start. We at La 27e Région have our own theory of change. We started when we began 16 years ago, and we forget it. We forget we have it. It was just a few words somewhere, and we decided 2 years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and probably a bit inspired by Lindsay's work too, to reframe it, to renew it, to maybe upscale it too. My own perspective is that maybe the problem is that it's what is at the core. We talk about drawings and diagrams, but the core of theory of change is language, and we know how difficult it is to manage language. They are the one that manage language and those that don't manage it. It's a very brainy, it's a very intellectual work to manage, to build and to manage a theory frame. And sometimes I think it's not very inclusive as an exercise. So maybe my question is, if you want to apply not just for the happy few, because there is a risk to build a theory of change with a group of people who are supposed to be able to do it. So would there be another design of theory of change in the sense of why theory of change wouldn't be an experience? Why is it a group of words? And we know how it is difficult for people to handle words. So why wouldn't it be an experience? Why wouldn't it be a story? Why wouldn't it be, anything else than just words on a paper? Or so, my personal thinking about that is, how do we renew the design of theory of change? And maybe some of you have other experience of other design of theory of change. Even the word theory of change is not very easy. Because there is it gives a very difficult, from many people we are talking of theory of change with, they think we are talking about theory. So it's something not concrete. And I remember this quote saying, there is nothing more practical than a good theory. And I like this quote because when you really manage theory of change, you see how concrete is it. But how to make it more visible? Because again, it's a very intellectual exercise. So could we do a play, theater or whatever? But what could be a more diversified way to design theory of change? That would be my assumption, my insight as a starter. Yeah, like art and theater, exactly. Why not writing a piece of theater instead of a page of paper with? So why not telling a story, for instance? Do you have the same, or do some of you have other experience of theory of change on the way to design it? If there are experience in the audience, you're welcome. Does
Yes.
someone want to react on this?
We're a small enough group, so feel free to just jump in, raise your hand.
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
want.
Don't be
Just jump
shy.
in. There's not so many of us. Don't be shy.
So yeah, happy to jump in on a couple of thoughts. My name's Livy. I'm joining from the UK. Yeah, I guess I feel like we've had some debates in our work about whether or not a theory of change can act as a communications tool, and kind of almost wondering at times about whether this is the thing that is the motivator and helps people understand what you're about and who you are, or whether it's trying to do the underpinning theory that describes the things that kind of sit underneath it. And I feel like at times in our work, we've struggled to work out what the work is to do things like, as you're saying, like visualize a theory of change and bring that to life for people. And like they often serve multiple purposes, I guess. And it can be difficult when you're doing work in this space to understand which is the thing that you're trying to do. And often we try and do something with lots of things with one piece of work, well, one output, I guess, which is, yeah, definitely something that we have struggled with.
Yeah, I think you really need to know why you need a theory of change. And it's a very intimate reason most of the time. I mean, it's not only for other people. And sometimes you have to hide your theory of change also. You don't have to tell it to anybody or to everybody. There are some people there are some enemies, for instance, that don't really need to know exactly your theory of change. But as a person and individually, I think, and so that's why it's different to think in terms of theory of change and the way to communicate it. You can also document your theory of change and document the process of it. So you open the black box of the process of theory of change. How do you build it? How do you reframe it, etc.? This is something you can document. But I agree that it's not easy to think in terms of communication or dissemination first.
There's a comment in the chat, and Annie, I'd invite you to join us out loud if you're comfortable doing that. But it's just to tell us more about this. But Annie says, I was thinking about the design narrative theory by Sabine Jungiger, an artifact that could be considered a type of theory of change. Would you share a little bit more about that, if you don't mind?
Yeah, hi, thanks. No, I was just wondering, I don't know if anyone else knows about this. It's an academic article, or perhaps it was part of a book, but basically Junginger and Bailey came up with this theory of design narratives, and we were kind of evolving that this autumn at the city of Helsinki or in the local design community, and we created this canvas that had these parts. So first was like we had to kind of map out the origin story of how, for example, how design came to government, and then we had to map out the location of our function, and then the mission of what we want to achieve, and then map out the journey that we have been taking towards this mission. So I was thinking that it's actually a bit similar to what you were discussing, that actually it's also some kind of artifact, and we can design a process or like a co-creation process around it, and it can create this this narrative or this artifact that can then kind of work as a theory of change for people that are owning it. So and in the article by Junginger and Bailey, they give a lot of examples of from companies and organizations using this. So I don't know if it's relevant, but I was kind of seeing a lot of similarities between these ideas. So
yeah,
thank you.
Did you share it? Did you share the article? Yeah.
Yeah, I can link the article as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Andy. Go ahead, Shazad.
Hi, thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. I'm sorry that I was late. I have a question which has been spinning in the back of my mind, and I would like to throw it out on the table to see if it lands. I appreciated your input on language and how the importance of being mindful to be inclusive in that social work of bringing people on board. And in my work with cities, what I see is that a lot of it depends on the culture that is present. Is there a culture of trust? Is there a culture of competition? Is there a culture of blame and shame? Or is there something where we actually build together? Do we feel safe to express ourselves in that particular context? When I see great examples, like the work that was presented by Nantes, which looks fantastic, so congratulations, I feel like that's something that emerges from a lot of work. I can only imagine all the people you talk with, all the relationships, all that social work to kind of get it going, you know? And I see a lot of places where that's not the case. And it's very difficult. So does that resonate? Is there something that you can share about kind of making that shift? Or how can we collectively encourage a culture of safety and expression in order to get to these places? It's very broad, but it's been at the back of my mind, and this is a room of very interesting people, so I wanted to throw it out there. Thank you.
Yeah, great point. I see remarks also from Michael, who share how do you create space around the markers so that people who are can use it differently or say that they don't agree exactly. So it's also a way to create debate, for instance. Magali, Virginie, do you want to do you have any idea on this idea? Of course, Nantes is a perfect place where there is trust, but I can't say bad thing because they are members of La 27e Région for years. So no, I think Nantes is a bit one of the exceptions we got here in France. There are other cities where there is this level of involvement, alignment, but it's not the case in many French cities. So I think we must see Nantes and a few examples in France, in Europe, and everywhere as the margin. And that's why you are so right to say, okay, but what do we do with 90% of normal cities not normal, but cities where there is not this level of engagement and trust, etc. And what to do also with bigger cities. There is Paris here. Charles Franco is from the city of Paris. The city of Paris is 55,000 civil servants. So how do you, it's not just about trust, etc., but how do you do that in big cities, in big administration? So I think your question is really, does someone want to react to this question? Yeah, Charles, do you want to react?
If I may, yes. I share the point with the language, and I think, to be honest, I'm not very much comfortable with the idea of theory of change and the connection with approach for change. I think there is a lot of reflections about what triggers change, what the means or devices we can use in order to organize and to provoke some changes within the organization or the landscape of the organization. But speaking about theory of change also implies putting some kind of assessment of what's you're able to tackle directly with the organization. To put in other words, you need space, room, and capabilities of reflexivity in order to assess whether what's options could be the most relevant. And for instance, speaking about the pillars in Nantes, tells us about the way to merge traditional policy within the organization with common stakes or common goals, which are not directly translated into the budget, which is the key of the issue here. And I don't know any representative in Paris or any other administration that is very much committed or involved into defining theory. There is no room for theory, in fact. From my point of view or my perspective, they're willing to achieve goals. They're eventually willing to find the best way or the best path. But assessing what you can actually use to find new path is not really something that interests people, I guess. So there is a difficulty also to bring some new language or new concept or abstractions to tell us about what's your assumptions and what you resigned in order to achieve some goals or to build goals walking the way.
That's why maybe naming it markers instead of theories was a smart idea. So maybe it's easier to sell markers to a politician than to sell theories.
Yeah, but that also, you could have called them approach for change. That doesn't make it a theory. There is a theory that underlies, I guess, which is not completely explicit neither.
I just want to say something quick about that, and then we'll hear from Randy, I think. I just want to remind us too that there's this, for me anyway, there's this tension of how, like, different ways as people who call ourselves or think of ourselves as public sector innovators, is this a useful intervention in the systems that we're trying to change? To go back to how Georgia set up the dominant culture and the kind of values in that graphic, theories of change are they a way, I guess, for us as people trying to change those dominant systems and the dominant culture that do have these kinds of norms, like you're talking about, Charles, about resistance to certain language and resistance to certain ways of thinking and working. Is this a useful practice as an intervention, as an innovator into the dominant system?
Honestly, people that say they are innovators and come within the organization are not always, they are not being paid so much attention, because they bring friction instead of solution.
Yeah. Maybe we can shift to the other question, which was, there is another. Oh, sorry. Randy, and then Randy, do you want to react? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I apologize myself. I'm new to this group and also arriving late, so I appreciate I'm perhaps in the absence of some of the context that was shared, but thought I'd just jump in and be active rather than sitting passively in the background. A couple of thoughts. I mean, especially with the idea of innovation at the front and the nature of innovation or an innovation pathway being somewhat emergent. I think theory of change is most critical from a design perspective in the same way a business model is important to an organization, in that those who have formulated something of an intention, a vision, a purpose, then need to coalesce or have their collective idea represented in a way that ensures there's a common understanding of the path that's being pursued. I think a risk that exists in developing an innovation pathway is that people have a different relationship to what's being designed, and without something explicit that serves the purpose of establishing a clear agreement, there's the potential for people to have their own ideas about what's actually happening or why. So I think a theory of change as a foundational artifact is fundamentally critical. But as we get from the design and perhaps what's at the core out to the communications, I think the points that Charles made are really critical as well, in that I think we need to know our audience. And for some that are very practically oriented or being impacted in some way, shape, or form, expected to participate, it's important to understand how they need to be appeased, what's motivating for them, the level at which they need to be engaged. Otherwise, you can really turn people off or, create the wrong impression. And the last thing I'll mention is, I think as part of an innovation process, a theory of change is also critical because the pathway is emergent. And ultimately, if we're going to adjust course or learn from our experience, the theory of change should be evolved. And it provides I guess, a reference point for us to come back to in identifying how what's learning is evolving our own idea and design of how change can best be shaped or influenced looking ahead. I hope that's a useful contribution at some level. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Let's hear from Fuad, and then we'll move on to our second prompt for today.
Yeah, just a really quick one, just following up on Randy's comment. I think communication down to the frontline part of the organization is really important when it comes to theories of change. And I think the idea of the type of language that's required at the top level of the organization in terms of what drives the political cycles, as well as the executive and senior leadership within governments and public service, is different than the people on the front line buying into the theory and the practical implementation of the change. And I think there's a difference there. So that language needs to translate all the way through down to the front line, and also get their input in as well to craft how the theory of change can be communicated and effectively implemented.
Thanks so much, Fuad. There's a couple of other comments I'll just quickly read in the slide. There's some interesting things about language in here, I think, that are coming up for many of us in different ways, but making the language of theories of change more inclusive, using stories instead of challenging words or concepts, bringing out the practical and concrete sides of the theory. And then this last one, I think that is maybe a nice way to pull a few threads together from what we were just talking about, is this that we need enabling conditions and culture of power, like of contending and reckoning with power, creating psychological safety. If we are to do that deep work of questioning and reevaluating the things that theories of change ask us to do inside our organizations and inside ourselves too, I think that we need to pay attention to what the conditions are and the culture are there. Then, folks are talking about trust and safety in relation to that. So thank you all. So our next prompt, and we'll spend another 15 or 20 minutes here before we close together, is what do we think the evolution of this practice of markers or theories of change or approaches to change, whatever words we want to use to call this, like, deeper, clearer understanding of what it is that we're doing in our work, maybe is the simplest way to say that. So what does the evolution of that thinking and practice look like? And then I think for us, it's like we heard from Virginie and Magali about the moves towards, there's a direction to their theory of change, right? Like the two main pillars were around social and ecological health, well-being, transformation. So how might we make this work more ambitious and more radical? Our theories of change, our approaches to change, how might we actually, as innovators, people who hold responsibilities for innovation in whatever way we identify ourselves as that, how do we contribute to making that the direction of our work more ambitious and more radical, and how might theories support that? So again, Stéphane, Virginie, Magali, maybe we'll start with you and then open it up to the others.
I can start. I think if we are, for instance, if we take the perspective of Nantes or any city that want to build, to reframe progressively theory of change, I would say that being more radical is to confront with the taboos of a public organization. So what are the taboo of a public organization? Maybe some of the taboo is that most people are right. Most people have the same culture, the same mindset. So how do you, as an organization, are more inclusive, more diversified? How do you, as an organization, give a voice to non-manager, the people who are not at the top level of the organization? But the taboos is also the difficulties, the failure in policies. There are many city. I don't think Nantes is in this situation, but there are there are many cities that don't want to face their failure, their difficulties. So I think being more radical is to be able to reframe a theory of change in the direction of a more humble vision, more accepting the debates, accepting the failures, accepting the difficulties, facing all the what I call the taboo of public policies. So taboos depends on government, on cities. There are some cities who have some taboos and some other who have other taboos. But I really think that these so taboos also are also the domination system within the administration, or the relationship with neighbors. So I think that a city that wants to be more radical must identify all the taboos she has as an organization and decide if she wants to face it, and maybe the one that she wants to face first, and the one that she can't face immediately, but have a clear and honest vision of the taboo that she has to face. That was my spontaneous thinking when you asked this question. I didn't really prepare it, but I like the idea of public taboos, because there are many taboos specific to public organization, specific to local government, specific to the national states. But yeah, I think, and specific within an organization, top managers and medium manager, I don't have the same taboos, but I think it's fair to speak about taboos.
Or maybe, Stéphane, I can add some things.
Yeah. Yes, please.
To go further, civil servants say some things to us, because we meet them in a large meeting, and so they say, first of all, they need more cooperation, and so it's a bit the same that it's Shazad, I think, that you talk about relationships. It's a key point for us, how we develop culture of cooperation, because when we talk about, for instance, a huge change as ecological transition, you have ideas from everyone, top manager, no managers, and all the departments. And so we have to develop hybrid projects. Hybrid, yeah, it's okay. Different projects, hybrid projects. So it exposes all the frames and all the silos and everything. It's a new way of thinking, a new way of thinking the needs, the real needs. And so we have difficulties, of course. Even in Nantes, we have a lot of difficulties, because, for instance, you have a person in a service somewhere in the territory who has an idea, but he doesn't know with whom he can share it. And because, oh no, it's not my part. No, it's urban development department. That they say, no, it's not me. It's, you know. And so we have to go further. We need a new governance of projects and of emerging projects, because there are a lot of ideas from civil servants, but also who come from citizens. And so we don't know exactly how to manage these new kind of projects, even if everyone wants to do it. But there's a lot of difficulties about that for us, really. And the second point is that we have to take risks. We have to choose. It's for me, it's important to go further. And so to have greater ambition, we have to choose. That means, for instance, our mayor has some kind of important decision, for instance, about, comment on dit, le stationnement?
Parking.
Parking, of course. But parking, for instance, she has real choice, important choice that everybody has to go and explain to citizens. But it's not always like that. Sometimes there is no choice because it's too new, too different. And so it's, I think, a real lever to go further.
Just seeing what Annie's put in the chat here, Stefan. Taboos are maybe changing with times. And Annie, feel free to jump in and add more to that. I also like Stefan and I in our planning for this, they're very different in different contexts. And I think that's really interesting about us being able to have conversations across different contexts like this, because what's taboo in France might not be here anymore and vice versa. So it's kind of an interesting field building conversation to have too about contestation in our practice. But Annie, did you want to say anything else about what you put in the chat there?
Yeah, I was just thinking that I've been working in the city organization for almost 5 years now, and I have seen a drastic change in what are the taboos. Maybe that in this past 1 year we have started to talk about these short-term things, like even long-term has now become adaptation and preparation and risk management, which are more short-term things. They are things we need to immediately be doing. So I feel like this idea of this radical, how to bring more radical thinking is that we need to be able to get back to the long-term thinking. So I have been really working this past few months about how to introduce again this futures thinking. So maybe when I talk about 2030s or 2050s, they start being more radical with their ideas, but because of the taboo now that people want to focus on risk and on adaptation and on preparation, because of the crisis, that it's kind of like really difficult to say like, hey, I want to talk about long-term things, radical things. So yeah, that's my experience.
I like your idea, but starting from your point, maybe we could try to build future theory of change. Why focusing on present and current theory of change? Why not combining perspective and backcasting, foresight exercise and theory of change? So in the case of Nantes, why not writing, or more than designing more generally, the theory of change of Nantes in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? That would be an exercise. You know this concept of souvenir of the future. When you get people involved in a backcasting exercise where you simulate the future, people come back with a change in mind. They tend to think a bit more in the long term. So we need to organize, theory of change of the future to stimulate long-term thinking in the mind of people. So that could be another way to be more radical and to build future theory of change. What do you think, Magali? Should we write not a future theory of change for the 20 next years?
Tricky question. Especially I was thinking in my mind, because I'm also responsible for foresight activities in the city of Nantes. So, but still, we realized that over the past, I don't know, maybe 6 to 10 last years, we kind of stopped to have just long-term exercise, like what would not be in 2030, 40, 50. Because on the other end, than what you said, sometimes people get so disconnected from the present, then they just have fun or in portraying the nightmare future or the wonderful future. But it's so hard to have them back on the ground and on the present and on the path they want to do and the course of action they want to take now. Then sometimes not that effective. So, well, in our practice of foresight activities, we think that it's so important to not just practice foresight for the sake of the projection, but to actually change things right now. Then we kind of stop using those artifacts, but it's just one point of view from wrong practice it's not an all-time advice for foresight activities, but we usually end up with the thinking that actually when you do foresight activity, what you do is like, it's a guy who's been practicing foresight activities in local government for years that says, I don't know how to translate it in English, but he said that when you do foresight, what you do in fact is like getting your eyes sick on the present, on what's, like you s'abîmer les yeux sur le présent. You're looking at the present and what's happening now so hard, so in details, to see all the small change right now happening. That's the foresight activity, rather than thinking about 3 years, 20 years in front of you. So it's hard for me to answer this question. It's such a difficult job just to write your actual theory of change. Then it's sometimes, maybe it's more difficult or less connected to the ground to do it in the future. But that's one point.
And just, why do you need 6 different markers? Why not just only one?
I would say, well, I don't know why, but I think that the 4 ways of doing things markers that are innovation, experimentation, alliance of territories, citizen participation, and proximity are the deep roots of how Nantes is doing actually public services. And they're really, like, they're not new, they're really in the core of Nantes practice. And also I was thinking about that while reading the comments in the chat. Like, our context is also that a long tradition of and a long continuity regarding the political side was leading the city. Like, the left wings in different sets, but the left has been running the city for more than 25 years now. So there's a long continuity that's also quite helpful to work for the long term, and also a long tradition of participation at all the different levels. That's also quite helpful to implement the things. So it was also to forget that not to forget those 4 the 2 pillar markers are really the vision, and as a destination we aim to focus, and the 4 other ones are the ways we are going to use in the way we are practicing public services, doing projects, doing public spaces, that we should use to get toward those objectives. So they're not exactly on the same level.
Personally, I would use social justice and ecological change as a direction, and all the other markers as theories on which you based this change. But I don't want to launch this debate now, but in my mind, there would be one marker, one theory would be your vision, and then theory, proximity, experimentation, and all what you name making markers as one of the components of your theories. But that I don't want to put the mess in your construction, in your building.
Just to add something about that, because I did a marker, I think it was impossible because there is so much to do with just one pillar marker, and we know that we will have to conversate more between the 2 pillar markers, but there is a huge engineering communities just to develop one marker. So I don't think it's possible just now to do just one big, huge with everything. So it will be the vision, but it's not very pragmatic. Yeah, we can't choose it really to work with people and to go in every department and say, now what we will do. Well, just my point of view, my experience.
I think it's
Can we hear from Randy, Stefan?
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Lindsay. Yeah, I'm really interested in where the conversation's going. I appreciate the focus on futures, foresight, and even the mention of backcasting. And it brings me to maybe a question. It was mentioned earlier on as I joined that one of the weaknesses of the approach was around evaluation. And I mean, for me, if we're to be radical and let's say effective in how we focus on what we're radical about, there's a necessity to understand sustainability and in a science and ethics informed manner, and specifically with navigating towards thresholds. So if we think about the actual end goals that we need to achieve in order to have the well-being of our communities met, in order to achieve sustainability as it's defined, we can have a general understanding of what that looks like, or continue to make progress incrementally towards doing less harm or just a better future. But I think the imperative is there to have a concrete and an accurate assessment of how we're performing in authentic sustainability terms, and for that to be specific to the local context. I mean, frameworks like the donut and the SDGs are great in principle, but they do very little to nothing to inform prioritization and strategic thinking around how limited resources and radical actions are prioritized and taken. So I'm curious how that sits within this community, within the example, and what thoughts there are around this idea of localizing thresholds and navigating towards, I guess, a view of sustainability performance versus just incrementalism.
Does someone want to react? I must admit that we are not at this level at La 27e Région. We'd love to, but we are much, we are not there yet. Lindsay,
well, you've been thinking about the donut as a framework, right, Stefan, with some of the
I totally agree. We are running a program about new economic models. So we look at new indicators, at the donut, and I totally agree with you. It's just a framework for thinking, but it doesn't give any idea of implementation of what kind of data, how do you collect data, and we know that this is something that is really difficult to collect data on transition stuff, etc. So yeah, I can only agree with you. We've got a program called Bones Back, which is an action research, a 30 months action research, and about future economic policies, local economic policies, and how do you get from indicators to the reality is one of the question that the research question that we got in this program. So maybe I can tell you in a few months, but for the moment we are at the early stage. But all the insight and the feedback we got from cities is that they can't even get the data internally and externally about biodiversity, carbon print reduction. How do you measure it? Nobody knows. So yeah, I absolutely agree. The only thing we know is that we got to coalesce people, that we got to create collective portfolio approach, mission innovation approach. So this is something that we know now, but we don't know how to do it for real, at least in the aspect of data collections and the real management of all of this. I totally agree.
Could I offer a quick response? I certainly don't want to use this as an opportunity for promotion of any kind, but if you are interested, my colleagues I've been working with the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development on what's called the Sustainable Development Performance Indicators, which is the UN's recognition that the SDGs aren't really easy to operationalize at a local level, and leveraging what I would say is sort of their leading expertise on applying what's called context-based sustainability. So I'll put a link to the SDPIs in the chat, though they're sort of a compromise themselves. And what I thought I'd mention that might be interesting, given that this is a UBC-led conversation, is that we're doing this work with the city of Nanaimo, which became the first to adopt the donut in Canada. And they had the same experience that most donut cities do, which is that as soon as they get into trying to localize thresholds, they fall down on the complexity without any proper guidance or discipline to apply. And it's that guidance and discipline that's so fundamentally necessary. So happy to share more if you're interested.
Super,
I'll put a couple
super
links
interesting. Yeah, definitely interesting. Thank you so much.
Of course, pleasure.
Any other comments before we end for this first session? Don't forget to register for the next session. It will be another side of our change 3. This time we will talk about cultural change in a situation in France where there are controversies between communities in the island of La Réunion, and Isabelle will explain how she managed it with a training program. So don't forget to register. That was my advertising moment before you.
Good job, Stefan. Good job.
Yeah, you got the registering.
A couple of things in the slides too I could share, just because there's a few things in there for folks that didn't want to speak those out loud. So someone has said that a really radical approach would include embodied practices that were, and I think this responds to this like braininess that you were talking about, Stefan, of theories of change really living in our heads. But to get out of our head and into our bodies and our feelings and our emotional states is a helpful way to address and redress trauma and reconciliation and other practices, essential to really radical work. Another radical approach in there is to surface and challenge different worldviews. So actually name these controversies, name these taboos, and contend with them as part of our theorization work, as part of that practice. I think that kind of, it builds a different muscle. It's different than public engagement. It's different than politics. It's like a real humane processes and practices of conflict, engagement, and contestation to get to something different than when you came in with. And then there's a few comments in there around evaluation as well. With that, shall we close?
Yeah, I think we should.
Are we ready?
It's nearly time to have dinner here in France, or at least aperitif.
Yes, it's time for a
not
time
dinner
for a glass
yet,
of
but
wine for
not
you
dinner,
and for some more
but
coffee
some
for
wine,
us.
or yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you. And thank you so much, Virginie and Magali, for joining us. We really appreciate you sharing your work. It's such a gift for all of us to hear about what's happening inside your city. So we really are grateful for that.
I think it's the very first
Anglophone,
time.
we really thank.
It's the very first time they present it. So now they got to present it everywhere in France, in all meetings, seminars, and so on. They know that. But I think they really did it especially for us today.
Thank you. And thank you for me as an Anglophone and for other Anglophones in the room for sharing your work with us, your complex work with us in our first language and not your first language. We really appreciate that extra work that you've done for us. Yes. So, and thank you all for joining us. We hope to see you next week for our next conversation. And the recording for this will be up soon on the YouTube space. So you can watch for it and share it from there. We'll hang around for a few more minutes if anybody has any questions or anything, but otherwise enjoy the rest of your day or evening, and hope we'll see you soon.